What if the moment you stopped trying was the moment she finally started feeling the weight of losing you? You've chased, you've explained, you've held on when your heart was breaking, thinking that effort equals love and presence equals value. But in reality, the more you care outwardly, the more she retreats inwardly. Why? Because human psychology isn't wired to crave what's always available. The mind becomes numb to certainty. But when you pull back, not out of bitterness, but out of inner clarity, you change the dynamic completely. You stop asking, you stop proving, you stop caring, and suddenly, her certainty shatters. The energy shifts. The one who used to give it all is no longer reacting, no longer chasing, no longer bleeding emotionally in front of her. And that silence, that absence of need, it becomes a mirror, forcing her to feel what she's been avoiding, the cost of your absence. This video isn't about punishing her, it's about awakening yourself. Because the truth is, when you stop caring in your actions but start caring for your peace, that's when the emotional roles reverse. That's when she starts panicking, not because she lost control of you, but because she lost her place in your world. So if you're ready to reclaim your energy, hit like, subscribe, and comment below. My peace is not negotiable. Let's begin. Number 1. The power of not needing her explanation. Right now, you may be waiting for closure, a final conversation, a message, some neat explanation that makes it all make sense. But what if I told you closure isn't given, it's claimed, and the moment you stop seeking it from her, you reclaim something far more valuable than answers your sovereignty. She expected you to ask, to need clarification, to hold on just long enough for her to feel power in the disconnection, that maybe you'd say, "Can we talk?" Or, "I just want to understand what happened." But instead, you stayed quiet. You didn't beg for resolution. You became it. This is the essence of Stoic power, as Epictetus taught. Happiness and freedom begin with a clear understanding of one principle. Some things are within our control, and some things are not. Her reasons, her choices, her silence, all outside your control. But your reaction, that's yours, fully, and this time, you chose detachment over dissection. This isn't about pretending not to care. It's about understanding that needing her explanation means giving her authority over your peace. And peace is not a negotiation, it's a boundary. You didn't walk away angry. You didn't chase her shadow. You accepted reality with clarity, and in that moment, something in her shifted. Because when you stop asking why, she starts wondering what she lost. This reversal is psychological warfare without the war. You've removed her ability to feel like the gatekeeper of your healing. You've disrupted the emotional loop where she was the puzzle and you were the one trying to solve her. That dynamic is gone, replaced by stillness, the practical move. Don't send that final text. Don't watch her story, hoping for a clue. Don't ask mutual friends for context. Instead, say nothing. Focus entirely on your alignment. Hit the gym. Build the business. Create a life where your peace isn't conditional on her clarity. This silence, born from strength, not confusion, sends a signal louder than any plea. I don't need to understand your reasons to honor my path. Psychologically, this creates distance in her mind. Not the kind she controls, but the kind that forces reflection. Did he stop caring? Did I matter less than I thought? And the truth, you didn't care less. You just cared better. You cared for yourself. That's what she didn't expect. And that's what makes her wonder, long after you've stopped thinking about her. If you've ever stopped chasing closure and chosen peace instead, speak this below. I didn't need her explanation. I needed my freedom. Number 2, choosing peace over her attention. There was a time when her distance triggered a reflex in you, a need to be seen, heard, reassured. You'd check your phone, reread old messages, and post something just to see if she'd notice. You weren't seeking attention for ego. You were seeking relief from uncertainty, but attention is a trap when it becomes a substitute for inner peace. Then came the shift. You stopped looking for signals. You stopped posting for her. You didn't send the late night, just checking in message. You chose stillness, not the absence of noise, but the presence of self. And in that choice, you discovered what most never do, that true power is not in being wanted, but in no longer needing to be. From the Stoic lens, this is freedom, as Epictetus taught. He is free who lives as he wishes, who is neither compelled nor hindered. When her attention no longer dictates your emotional weather, you've reclaimed the one thing she never expected to lose: your self-regulation. Understand this. Many women don't pull away because they've stopped caring. They pull away to see if you'll chase, to feel the power of being pursued. But when you stop reaching, stop reacting, stop performing to get back what once was, you break the cycle. And in that break, something powerful happens. You go from being predictable to being profound. Not because you withdrew with bitterness, but because you finally saw your energy as sacred. You began investing it in silence, in creation, in rebuilding your focus where her absence once lived. Here's the practical shift. Unfollow her, mute the stories, resist the urge to accidentally show up in her orbit. These are small acts of sovereignty. They send the same message without words. I am not here for your attention. I am here for my alignment. Psychologically, this rewires the dynamic. She was once the sun you revolved around, but now you've become your own orbit. And that shift doesn't just make her curious. It makes her question everything. Why did he stop watching? Why is he so calm? Has he outgrown the part of him that needed me? Yes, you have. And in that evolution, you move from the man she once knew to a man she can no longer read. That's when presence becomes power. Not because you're loud, but because your absence no longer needs explanation. If you've ever chosen your inner calm over external validation, speak it now. I stopped seeking her attention because I found my peace. Number 3, unshaken by her distance because you don't chase storms. She started pulling away. Conversations became colder. Her warmth felt rehearsed. And in the past, you might have responded instantly, scrambling to close the gap, asking if she's okay, offering more of yourself to fill the silence she created. But this time, you didn't. You didn't reach for her. You didn't try to rescue the moment. You sat in the distance and stayed whole. Why? Because you've learned something powerful. Her retreat is not a crisis. It's a choice. And choices that aren't yours to make are never yours to fix. From a Stoic standpoint, this is the foundation of emotional power. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Her withdrawal, her silence, her testing behavior. It's not your responsibility. Your responsibility is how you hold yourself when you're not being held by her. That's what she didn't expect. She expected the usual pattern, that emotional tug of war, that you'd lean in harder the moment she pulled back, that your sense of connection depended on her availability. But instead, you remained still, not frozen, not passive, but calmly grounded in your own center. This isn't detachment as denial. It's detachment as discipline. And what happens next is subtle but profound. The absence of your reaction creates discomfort in her psychology. Not because you're manipulating, but because you've become unreadable. She used to know exactly what buttons to press, but now, her distance doesn't create drama. It creates space. And space, for someone used to controlling connection, becomes terrifying. Here's the practical action. When she goes quiet, don't fill the silence. When she distances, Don't close it. Let her feel the gap she created. And, more importantly, let her wonder why it no longer controls you. Psychologically, this initiates a reversal. She begins to question, is he not affected? Has he detached? Does he not care? But the truth is, you do care. You've just stopped proving it through panic. You've realized that love without self-respect is self-erasure, and that's a price you'll never pay again. She will feel your shift. The stoic distance that doesn't beg. The man who sees the storm but doesn't run into it. And that stability. That calm refusal to be pulled out of place. That's what haunts her long after the messages stop. Because now, she's not just sitting in her space, she's sitting with the man who refused to fill it. If you've ever chosen not to chase the chaos, write it below. Her silence didn't move me. I don't chase storms. Number 4, when you stopped watching her life from the sidelines. You used to watch everything, her stories, her posts, her online presence, not because you were desperate, but because some part of you still lingered in the doorway of her world, as if a view into her life might explain something, reveal something, or just keep you close in a quiet, invisible way. But one day, you closed the door. You stopped watching, stopped checking. You didn't mute her, you released her. And in that moment, you reclaimed something sacred, your focus. She might not have noticed it right away, but eventually, she did. The quiet absence of your digital shadow. The view count that used to include your name gone. The awareness that someone who once paid attention now no longer exists in her world. Not even from afar, from a Stoic perspective. This is more than just a click. It's a shift in identity. Attention is not free. Epictetus reminds us. Wherever your attention is, there is your soul. When you stop spending that attention on someone who no longer values it, you reclaim the energy that fuels your evolution. She may have expected you to fade slowly, to hover, to stay emotionally available even in silence. But instead, you vanished completely, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. Because watching someone who doesn't see you is not awareness, it's self-abandonment. And when you leave, not just emotionally, but digitally, it sends a message without saying a word. You no longer hold space in my mind. Here's the practical change. Stop viewing her life like a spectator. Don't analyze her captions. Don't rewatch the story looking for clues. Let the silence be complete, not just in conversation, but in attention. Let her feel the vacuum where your quiet presence used to be. Psychologically, this breaks the unspoken feedback loop. She used to feel your energy in the background, a sense of emotional safety, knowing you were still watching. But when that's gone, it creates unease, curiosity, a loss of control. She's not just losing your view, she's losing her grip. You've stepped out of her story, not as an ending, but as an evolution. And that exit is felt louder than any message you could have sent. Because now, she's not wondering what you think, she's wondering why you stopped thinking about her at all. If you've ever pulled your attention back as an act of self-respect, say this below: I stopped watching because I finally looked at myself. Number 5, when you started shining without her applause. There was a time when your progress was performed, not always consciously, but somewhere deep inside. You hoped she'd notice, that maybe if you became better, stronger, more focused, she'd circle back, that your glow-up would pull her gaze. But something inside you eventually broke through that illusion. You stopped growing to be seen and started growing to be free. No announcements, no indirect posts. No silent hope that she's watching your rise, just quiet, focused motion, one win after another, built in the dark, powered by pain, but purified by purpose. And somewhere in that process, you became something she no longer recognized, untouchable. This is the Stoic path. As Seneca said, we are more often frightened than hurt. and we suffer more from imagination than from reality. You no longer suffer under her silence because you've stopped imagining yourself as the man who needs her approval to thrive. You've replaced that old craving with a newer force. Momentum. What she sees now is not performance, it's transformation. And nothing creates more psychological gravity than a man who succeeds in silence. A man who no longer waits for applause. Because he's too focused on building things that matter, she expected you to struggle, to stall, to linger in limbo after she left. But instead, you evolved, not with fireworks, but with fire. Controlled, constant, quiet, until one day, it's undeniable you no longer need her story. Because you're writing one too powerful for her to be the center of. Here's the real shift. You stopped reacting. You started creating. You cut the emotional leash that once tied your validation to her attention, and in doing so, you became something rare. A man whose success speaks, not for revenge, but for rebirth. And she feels that, not in what you say, but in what you don't. In the absence of performance. In the refusal to flaunt that restraint. It stings more than any proof of life you could have offered, because she realizes, he didn't just survive, he outgrew me. Psychologically, it haunts, because your name is no longer attached to a longing, it's attached to a legacy. If you've ever built something beautiful without needing her to see it, write this below. I didn't level up for her. I did it to leave her behind. Number 6, when her tests were met with your silence. You felt it, the sudden message out of nowhere, the half-hearted, "How are you?" the vague compliment after weeks of absence. She wasn't reaching out because she missed you. She was reaching out to see if she still could, to check if her hold over your emotions still existed, without giving anything real in return. But this time, you didn't bite. No reply, no emoji, no explanation, just stillness, not coldness, but clarity. And in that moment, you showed her something more powerful than words, emotional control. Most men fail this test. They take the bait, hoping this is the turning point, the reignition, the miracle they were waiting for. But all it does is reset the game. The moment you respond, you re-enter the loop. You become readable again, reachable, predictable, Epictetus wrote. Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. Her games, her ambiguity, her sudden interest after silence. Those are beyond your control, but your reaction. That's where your power lives, by not responding. You didn't just ignore her, you exposed her. You forced her to confront the one thing she never expected, that her presence no longer controls your peace. You used to react, you used to hope, but now you observe, and that observation, paired with stillness, is devastating in its impact. Here's the practical move. Recognize the difference between genuine connection and a test for control. Don't mistake curiosity for care. If she's not matching your depth, don't reward her reach. Let your silence be your boundary. Let it speak for the healed version of you. Psychologically, this creates something she can't name but deeply feels. It's the loss of influence, the end of emotional leverage. And when someone realizes they no longer know how to get a rise out of you, they start to question their own power. Did I lose him? Or did he outgrow me? That's what silence does. It creates space for reflection, not just yours, but hers. And that space is far more punishing than any argument, any long message, any "we need to talk," because it shows her the truth. You no longer exist within her emotional frame. If you've ever chosen not to respond to emotional bait, speak this below. I didn't ignore her to punish. I stayed silent to stay free. Number 7, when your presence became a privilege. not a pattern. There was a time when your attention was constant. You always replied. You were always available. Your presence became predictable, comforting, maybe, but ordinary. She didn't have to earn it. And the truth is, what's given too easily rarely gets respected. But that was the old you. The new you is selective, intentional, no longer handing out your energy like it's free. Now, when you show up, it's a decision, not a habit. And that subtle shift doesn't just change how she sees you, it changes how everyone sees you. From the Stoic lens, this is discipline, Marcus Aurelius taught. Ask yourself at every moment, is this necessary? Is this conversation worth your time? Is this person adding to your peace or pulling from it? You no longer invest by default, you invest by design. And that design changes the emotional dynamic completely. She used to think she had you, that you'd always be around. That even if she drifted, delayed, or disrespected, your presence would stay. But now, you're different. You don't chase, you don't prove, you don't over-explain. You simply withdraw, not in silence, but in sovereignty. This isn't playing hard to get, this is hard to forget. Because now, when you speak, it matters. When you show up, it's felt. Your energy carries weight because it's no longer everywhere. And that rarity, that restraint, it becomes the source of your power. Here's the practical shift. Stop giving equal access to unequal effort. Don't explain where you went. Don't announce your standards. Just leave them. Let your consistency be reserved for those who value it. Let your attention feel earned, not assumed. Psychologically, this creates a loss she can't articulate. She may still have access to your profile, your number, your history, but she no longer has access to you, and that distance, born from quiet elevation, becomes haunting. What changed? Why does he feel so far away yet more present than ever? You became the man she has to reach for. Because your time is no longer a given, it's a gift. And once she realizes it, she'll either step up or disappear. Either way, you win. If you've ever stopped making yourself available to protect your value, say this now. My presence isn't routine, it's reserved. Number 8. When your indifference wasn't an act. It was evolution. She thought it was a game. That you were holding back to get a reaction, that your calm was performative, that somewhere underneath the silence was the same man waiting, hoping, checking his phone just like before. But it wasn't an act, it was an arrival. You no longer cared, and not in a bitter way, not because you hated her, but because you'd outgrown needing her to feel whole. You stopped measuring your self-worth by her attention. You stopped wondering what she thought. You stopped crafting your life around her absence. And that shift, that's the one she fears most. Stoicism calls this apatheia, not emotional numbness, but emotional clarity, as Seneca wrote. The wise man is content with himself. You didn't stop feeling. You simply stopped letting those feelings run your life. You detached not out of rejection, but out of truth. You no longer needed her to validate what you already knew. That you're enough. This is what most people never expect. They think the heart always holds on, that love leaves residue, that the man they used to have will always be available on some emotional level. But when you reach this level of detachment, you don't flinch, not at her posts, not at her stories, not at her return. You've gone from emotionally invested to emotionally independent. Here's what changes in practice. You don't feel the urge to prove anything. You don't revisit conversations in your mind. You don't react to her energy shifts. You don't wonder anymore because she's no longer part of your calculation. Not because she doesn't matter, but because you matter more, psychologically. This is what cuts the deepest. A cold shoulder still carries emotion, but a calm indifference, that's different. That's final. She senses it in your posture, in your eyes, in the effortless way you're no longer present in her emotional field. And that's what lingers. Not the man who begged, not the man who performed strength, but the man who walked away in silence, never looked back. She's not confused by your distance. She's haunted by your peace. If you've ever reached the point where your indifference wasn't fake, it was freedom, write it below. I didn't pretend to be done, I was... Number 9. When she realized she was no longer the part of your future. At one point, she was in every plan. Every version of your future had her in it, standing beside you, growing with you, building something together. You spoke about dreams with her in the frame, and even in the silence that followed your distance. She still assumed that some part of you was holding space for her return, but you stopped imagining. And that's when everything changed. You didn't announce it. You didn't make a post about moving on. You simply recalibrated, quietly, internally, powerfully. You removed her from the vision not out of spite, but out of necessity, because the future you're building now requires clarity. And she no longer fits the foundation. That's what she never expected to be replaced by direction. Stoic wisdom is clear. We are not to be ruled by emotion, but led by values. Seneca said, "A man who suffers before it is necessary, suffers more than necessary." And continuing to plan a future around someone who's not actively part of your present, that's self-inflicted suffering. You saw it, and you stopped it. This isn't a dramatic shift. It's subtle, surgical. You stopped imagining her name next to your wins. You stopped wondering if she'd approve of your moves. You stopped mentally saving a place at your table. You stopped carving space in your mind for someone who didn't value it. And what she feels now isn't loss. It's absence, true absence. Because people can feel when they're no longer being energetically held. They sense when they've stopped being the emotional landmark in your journey, when they're not even a footnote in your story anymore. That realization doesn't hit like thunder. It hums like silence that won't go away. Here's the practical step. Build forward. Speak in terms that don't include her. Surround yourself with people who are part of your now, not your then. Don't share memories, share vision. Not out of bitterness, but out of rebirth. Psychologically, this disorients her. She was prepared for distance, for delay, but she wasn't prepared to be erased from the destination. That's not just painful, it's identity shaking. Because if she's not in your future, she can no longer define your past. You didn't need to block her. You just outgrew the version of yourself that needed her beside you. If you've ever built a future that didn't include the one who walked away, say it below. I stopped waiting and started building without her. Number 10. When you let go. Fully, finally, and without looking back. Letting go isn't always a dramatic act. Sometimes it's quiet. A morning where you don't check her page. An afternoon where her memory passes through you like wind instead of fire. A night where you finally fall asleep without the weight of what could have been. That's when you know. You didn't just move on, you moved inward. There's no ceremony, no final message, no internal debate. Just a steady, calm realization that everything you were waiting for, closure, validation. Her return is no longer needed because you no longer need her to feel complete. That's what true detachment looks like. Not forcing yourself to forget, but no longer needing to remember. Epictetus said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life." And in this moment, you've achieved it not by winning her back, but by releasing the illusion that she was ever responsible for your peace. She might feel it. She might not, but either way, it's done. You're no longer secretly hoping she'll come around. You're no longer feeding conversations in your head that never happened. You're no longer caught between what was said and what wasn't. You've stopped spinning in the loop of maybe, and that loop was her last grip on your mind. Now, you're still. That stillness is terrifying to someone who used to control you with chaos, who expected you to wait. who expected your loyalty to last longer than her presence. But silence born from suffering is shaky. Silence born from clarity. That's permanent. Here's the final shift. You don't just remove her from your heart, you remove her from your storyline. She no longer defines your origin. She doesn't shape your arc. You're writing this next chapter with new hands, clean energy, and a vision that doesn't ask for her approval. Psychologically, this is the moment she feels most, because, unlike emotional games or temporary distance, true release is irreversible. You're not acting strong, you are strong. You're not faking healing, you're whole. And that truth cuts deeper than any goodbye. You didn't burn bridges, you built boundaries. And now, you walk forward not out of rage, but out of rhythm with who you've become. If you've ever reached the point where letting go wasn't hard, it was necessary. Write this below. I let go not to hurt her, but to find me. You began this path believing that caring more would win her heart, but now you see caring without boundaries doesn't earn love. It dissolves self-respect. And once you withdrew your emotional investment, not to manipulate, but to protect your peace, she started to feel the quiet terror of being replaced in a space she thought was hers by default. You didn't abandon her. You returned to yourself. And in doing so, you stopped feeding her indifference and made her feel the silence she once ignored. She didn't panic because you left. She panicked because you stopped needing her to stay. If you're ready to lead with self-worth, like this video, subscribe and comment. I don't chase. I attract through presence. Be still. Be firm. Because emotional indifference, when rooted in self-respect, becomes your greatest power.